can be really hard to give yourself permission to be bold. And there's a quote that floats around a lot that goes something like, competence breeds confidence. And I think that's a great quote. I think it's true, right? I think that when you're a person with integrity, inevitably you look at the world through the lens of, am I actually adding value here? Like, am I actually contributing to whatever this is in a positive way? I think that the thing that made me make this video is that in having conversations with a lot of you guys, I find that you actually are already incredibly competent. Various areas of life. Your physical fitness, right? Your relationships, the way that you communicate with people. Your hard skills even, right? Specifically. And yet, when it actually comes to feeling presently like you are capable, like you are valuable, there's a huge lapse. And so what I wanted to kind of talk about in this video is the idea of, I guess you could call it acting, right? I struggled really badly for most of my life up until this point, well, up until a few years ago, with that feeling of just insecurity for whatever reason, right? Traumas, the past, all of these things that have happened to me, continuing to compound this idea that I need to defend my ego, really. I need to defend my emotions first and foremost, rather than prioritize taking risks that would actually give me a level up, right? Because that's what growth is. It's taking calculated risks and growing from those risks, becoming competent, right? But when we prevent ourselves from doing that through these various emotional narratives, that's what we're doing. We're curtailing ourselves. And so I think that one of the things that helped me the most to really grow was to practice this act almost, right? To sort of create a perception for myself of who it is that I wanted to be and fake it till I made it, I guess you could say. Now, that wasn't the methodology that I had at the time. I wasn't like, I'm just going to continue to fake this and eventually it's going to work. It was more like I realized that there was almost like a flip of a switch that could happen, right? I realized when I watched people, the people that exuded confidence, it was just a feeling. It was like clearly they were more optimistic. Clearly they were more energetic, right? Clearly they were more willing to show up and have the world like thrown at them because they had a perception that it's like, I can't really be harmed by these things, right? I can be backtracked. I can receive a reality check, right? I can get the data that perhaps I'm actually not as good at whatever I thought I was, than I am. But that's really it, right? The ideas that people have, the feelings that they have, these things are up to me to decipher and interpret and decide if it's valuable for me. And I don't think most of us really have this kind of conversation on a regular basis. Most of us take the world at face value, and that includes our emotions, right? The things that we think, the way that we feel. We have a tendency to identify these things as me, as part of me. This is who I am. I'm feeling this thing. Therefore, that's my thing right there. But the truth is much more convoluted than that, right? It doesn't actually have to be so direct. And this is kind of where that idea of acting kind of comes back into play, right? You have the ability to tell yourself any story you want, right? Now, most of the time, we are animals, right? I know I'm kind of bouncing all over the place here, but we are flesh and blood beings, just like cats, just like dogs, just like turtles. And yet, for some reason, when a cat is chased by a wolf, when a cat is chased by like a dog in the street, two wild unhoused animals in Urbania, one is chasing after the other one, right? In that moment, the cat feels all kinds of, I'm sure, terror, fear, which immediately translate into action. But after that happens, that's it, right? That's the extent of that fear and terror, and maybe it lives inside the cat's body. But the fact of the matter is, right after that experience, the cat is right back to doing its thing, right? It's hunting for its next meal. It's bathing in the sun. Just like its life was not just on the line. And so we as humans are the only animals that we're haunted by the past and the future, right? As well as the present. And it typically prevents us from being present. And so I want you to kind of think about this idea of narratives and stories and the imagination and kind of what your world is telling you through the perception of your senses, right? And can that be adjusted? Can that be changed? Can you tell yourself a brand new story? And you will start to find that this is really the only thing that is actually standing between you and feeling okay, right? A lot of the time, that's really it. It's like we are giving into a particular story and we continue to tell ourselves that story over and over and over again. And that really compounds in who we believe ourselves to be, right? And so consider this idea of acting, right? One of the great spiritual prophets of the newer day, Neville Goddard, kind of talks about this idea of acting as if, right? Acting as if you are something right now. And because the reality is that's typically what is missing from your experience when you are feeling consistently dejected, burnt out, embarrassed, down on yourself, right? Is that there is a story that there is a reason why you're not good enough. Something that you've done, something that you consistently do that is a transgression against the world and the universe. And thus it's okay to take, call it humility, but then really treat yourself as though you are not valuable, like you really don't have anything to offer. That all starts to shift just by noticing it, right? That all starts to shift just by questioning, is this actually real? Like, is any of this actually true, right? When I feel this sense of embarrassment, or when I feel this sense of really being, incapable, right? Again, having like broken all these rules of the past, consistently, broken all these rules, and you're kind of keeping this tab. Is this actually serving you, or is it just a defense mechanism, right? What's the word for that? Like I guess it's a defense mechanism, like a coping mechanism, right? Is that a lot of the times we're more afraid of who it is that we could become if we allowed ourselves to really be authentic, to really be good people, to be genuine value creators and genuine value adders, whether it is through doing something or just by existing, right? That was one of those comments that, I apologize for the hair. I honestly hate the way my hair looks today. Sorry about that. This is something that a lot of us really struggle with, is this idea of the value tax, right? The idea of like whether we're actually worth it or not, right? Is this life something that is one where I am purposeful, right? And a lot of us give ourselves the judgment that no, we're not. We are not valuable. We are not purposeful. And that leads us to live a life either in the shadows or live a life that is not in alignment with what we really want to achieve in this life. And so I don't really know what else to add here. There's a cop like driving down. I got my problems with cops, so sorry about that. So I guess the whole point of this video is just that all this stuff really exists in your own mind, right? And we use stories and we use these kinds of like trade-off mechanisms. Like we're constantly making compromises. We're constantly like taxing ourselves and demanding payment in return. It's like very transactional, the way that we exist within our own minds a lot of the time. And so I guess what I'm trying to do in this video is invite you to realize that most of that is made up. Like most of that's not actually really real. And when we kind of dangle fulfillment for ourselves on this carrot, like, it's way out here. If you just did this, this, and this, typically those taxes are pretty hefty, and we don't acknowledge just how hefty that is in our own mind, right? Like change who you are, change the way that you operate, change all of these various things. But typically all you really need to change is just letting go of the fear and the doubt and the indecision, right? It's okay to be a person who's kind of introverted. It's okay to be a person that has a disability, right? Like can you change who you are? Can you change the things about yourself? Absolutely. You can change anything, right? You can be anybody. I don't know, various manifesty people will tell you, like, you're fucking, you got one short leg, one long leg. You can just imagine that shit out of the way. But I'm not here to tell you if that's true or not. What I am here to tell you is like, a lot of the time the reason that you do that is because it's like you can't imagine that you could be successful the way that you are now. That's really it. Like there's no way that little you, right? Little old you with your silly voice and your silly haircut and the silly way that you dress, that just could never be the way things are, right? The way that you talk to people, the way that you like laugh, that's gotta be, if I just fucking change that, all of these other things would line up for me. And that's just, again, what are you actually doing when you're telling yourself that story? You're just creating more hurdles as to why it's not okay to be who you are. And I don't think that most people realize that they're doing that. And I think that it's like, again, it's a convenience thing. It's a thing that we do because it gives us permission to deflect, to avoid, to postpone ourselves. There's a really great YouTuber. I'll just straight up tell you, I want to be like him. He's such a cool guy. But he has a great video called "Why Do You Postpone Yourself?" And that's so quintessential to this point, right? And quintessential to these conversations that I've been having of like, if only this, if only this, if only this. I'm going to tell you right now that it's if you are listening to this video and you have this idea, because I totally would have, right? You have this idea that it's like, okay, so you're telling me I don't actually need to make objective changes. What I actually need to do is just start to pretend that I feel okay with everything. Yeah, I guess that's kind of true. I do think you need to make objective changes, but I think that those objective changes will always feel forced until they come from a place of a genuine desire to improve yourself, right? If you're in the gym lifting weights because you're like, I'll be happy and I'll be, fulfilled once I have these giant shoulders or once I have a six pack or something, you're not going to find a whole lot of motivation there. Like it won't last that long, right? However, if you show up from a place of like, I genuinely want to experience the world through a body that's strong, right? Through a body that's healthy, through a body that I have faith in, right? You're a whole lot more likely to continue to show up and keep moving. I don't think that vengeance and anger and hate are necessarily bad motivators. I think they can be great motivators. The thing is, they just demand a lot more energy that is really hard to sustain from a place of like health and care, I guess you could say. And so when I have these conversations, and I hear people use objective facts as sort of this lens through which to prevent themselves from achieving things, that is sort of the advice that I have, right? Is just, how long can you do this? How long can you go, keeping a scorecard against yourself and constantly reminding yourself all the reasons why you're inadequate? Once you achieve the objective successes that you're talking about here, do you genuinely believe that the feeling is going to change? And I'm not saying it doesn't. I do think that objective success absolutely affects feeling and influences feeling. The thing is, it's always going to be short-lived. The baseline that you will always return to is the norm that it's like the feeling norm that is most normal for you, the feeling norm that is your default, right? That's where you'll always return. And so until you really begin to change that, and I'm working with a couple of you guys that I say this to a lot, that changing your mind, it can be the most difficult practice, like compared to changing your body, right? It's very objective. You eat differently, you exercise differently, you take care of your sleep differently, and your body will change. Taking care of your mind feels a lot more challenging because it's like acknowledge that I am disempowering myself, right? And do it as though I'm doing a push-up. Kind of a hard conversation for a lot of us to have. And the reason is almost all of us, damn near none of us, were given the tools to do any of this stuff. And so when I say to you, start to acknowledge when you're disempowering your thoughts and start to have a conversation with that, right? Narrate with yourself. Okay, why am I telling myself this? Am I really this, this foolish or this annoying or this lazy, right? If I ask you to have that conversation with yourself, it can be really jarring, right? Because again, going back to something I said earlier in this video, we don't often acknowledge that is changeable, right? We more than often, we're looking at our thoughts, we're looking at our feelings, like I said, as though they're things that are just stagnant. That's who I am. I am saying that, or I'm thinking that because that's fucking native to me. That's like my blood flowing through my body, right? That's like the fingers on my hands. That's who I am. But it's not who you are, right? You are infinity within yourself. I'm not here to say that you're a fragment of the universe and like every part of you is just stardust. Like technically it's true. Maybe it's not as, interwoven as the Buddhists want us to believe. Maybe it is. But the bottom line is it is changeable, right? You have the infinite universe inside of your brain. You can think anything that you want. And brain chemicals are real, like the wiring of your subconscious mind. These are all very real things. And I'm not here to discount the psychology, but what I am here to say is that nobody expects you to get jacked from doing one push-up. If any fucking one of you, like, it doesn't matter what your skill set is, it doesn't matter what your knowledge is, that one push-up is not going to turn you into Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? And so if you were a fitness coach, as I was, and I guess I am again, if you were a fitness coach and someone said to you, hey, Johnny, I did one push-up, I'm not seeing the results that I want. You'd be like, first problem, you're a dumbass. No, just kidding. You might not be as rude as I am. You would be like, look, man, that's not, you're being a little wishful here. Look, one push-up's not going to change. And I know it was painful, and I know it probably took a lot of effort to get yourself, to huff and puff and actually do that one push-up. But it's not enough, man. Like here's the thing. You have to figure out how to kind of tune out of that doubt-based conversation, all of the fears, all of the emotional narrative that's going to get in the way of you doing more push-ups. And brother, do more push-ups, right? Like, you got to do 1,000 of those push-ups before you even see a remote difference, right? You got to do those push-ups multiple times a week. You got to do those push-ups in sessions, 30 minutes, right? And you have to expect that this weekly schedule of all of these sessions of 30 minutes every single week is something that you're going to do for a year. Now, if you do that, I can guarantee that you're going to come back with some decent results, right? I think my hair looks insane today. But that's what you would say. And so when people come, when I'll have this conversation with people and I'll consistently bring it back to this idea of like, okay, well, how much challenging of the mental conversation did you do today, right? It's seldom any, right? Seldom any. It's all of that resentment that you were holding on to your ex. Like you had that yesterday, you had this conversation, angry conversation with your ex or your estranged father or the douchebag on the corner over and over and over again. How many times did you pause that conversation in your head and say, how am I feeling? Where in my body am I holding this tension? Is there really nothing more beneficial that I could be having a conversation with myself about right now? The second that you do that, you'll start to notice changes, right? This is one of the things that I refer to a lot on my channel is the letting go process by David Hawkins, where he talks about, it's noticing what is the thought, noticing what is the feeling associated with that thought and just being present with it. Now, I'm not saying there's no more work to be done, but for most of the work that we're going to be doing in our lives, this is it. It's just taking a pause and acknowledging like, I am in a dream right now. I am existing in a dream. The dream is flowing and I am not questioning any of it. I am simply following the narrative. Why? Is this narrative going to serve me? None of us do this. And so bringing everything full circle, right? If you want to experience a life where you are not constantly, sawing through your fingernails because you're afraid of something, right? Anything, something that you said, something that someone's going to say to you. You do this by really starting to build a new narrative, right? And starting to have a new conversation with yourself, starting to challenge yourself in these conversations. And I'll consistently bring it back to that metaphor of exercise, right? If right now you are consistently really hard on yourself, if right now you consistently give yourself permission to engage in vices with no bridle, right? If consistently you are, really succumbing to doubt and to these negative conversations about hard aspects of your character, concretely you are like this, concretely you are like this, in the most negative sense, you need to start to forge a new character. You can write it down if that helps at first. But eventually you have to start acting the part. And until you start acting that part, things are not going to shift. You are not going to create opportunities that will really allow you to finally prove that aspect of competence. But I don't think that confidence comes from competence alone. I think that confidence, it comes from the practice. It comes from the receiving of the competence, and then it comes from the recitation that you are good enough, right? The recitation of your own value to yourself. I'm not saying that you can't be successful without it. What I am saying is it's going to be a whole hell of a lot easier. So hope that was helpful, my friends. Just a little thought that popped in my mind. Really, I know I say this a lot in my videos, but I'm really struggling to come up with ideas. This is kind of just a practice in me showing up, single idea, reciting it. I appreciate all of you guys who've given me ideas. And I appreciate all of you guys for sticking around. So without further ado, my friends, hit that little subscribe bell, hit that subscribe button, hit that little notification bell, drop a comment if you want to converse about anything. Happy to make videos that you guys give me ideas on. For everybody that's reached out to me via my email, I really appreciate the conversations. For the few of you guys that have started coaching with me again, massive blessing for me. I love coaching more than anything, and I'm rediscovering that. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can shoot me an email. Without further ado, my friends, take care of yourselves. Peace, love, namaste. Talk to you later.